Well, hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to another week. This is Live at 5, a show that aptly I do at 5 p.m. Eastern Time every day, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on my main channel. On Fridays, we go over to my second channel, Actively Unwoke, for happy hour. And on Saturday, I am pleased to announce there will be a Sassy Saturday stream. As you guys know, this is a work hard, play hard community. So we do serious stuff for 6 days out of the week. And then on the 7th day, on Saturday, we have a little bit of fun and we engage in a little bit of drama because sometimes you need to have some fun to balance out the insanity of an otherwise crazy world. Well, guys, I do have a very special guest today that I'm really excited to have a chat with. We're going to be talking about basically everything that's wrong with the Republican Party, of which I'm sure there will be a long list that we won't even be. Now, listen, I rag on Republicans a lot, but I want you all to know that the conversation today, it comes from a place of love. It comes from a place of wanting to be better. And believe it or not, as much as I rag on conservatives, and let's be honest, I have made it into kind of an art form, I do it because I want you to be better. I do it because I actually do want you to win. Because although you're not perfect, you are still better than the alternative, which is absolute and total insanity. So I know my guest today is going to be able to give us some great insight into that. I've actually really appreciated his insights, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how I got to start following him in a second. But before we do that, we're going to do our shameless grifting and shilling because, guys, as you know, it is Monday. And Mondays are a very special day in my locals community because on Mondays, we have our community Zoom call. Now, we actually do 2 community Zoom calls every week for my local supporters. We do them on Mondays at 7 p.m. and then on Wednesdays at noon. Mondays in the last several weeks have kind of turned in to an epic, like our Monday Zoom call is longer than the 10 Commandments. It is longer than Gone with the Wind. It is longer than the great epic films of our times because we talk to each other, we enjoy each other's companies. It is the only sane place on the internet. And if you want to get in on that awesomeness, you can become a member and a supporter in my locals community, where not only will you support the work I'm doing, but you will also get access to just an amazing community, unlocking all the features of locals. You'll get access to our Zoom calls. You'll get access to our supporter Discord. You'll get access to the Unwoke Army. You'll get access to our Bitchcraft, which is once a month a Zoom call where we bitch and we craft. So many things going on in my locals. And if you want to get in on the action, you can head over to kb.locals.com/support. You can join for $5 a month. You can join for $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free. You can also make a one-time gift, and I greatly appreciate the support, guys. As a reminder, I really can't do this work without the support of my locals community, and so I am extremely, extremely grateful. George Andre Veloso Nunez says, mount that like button like a chihuahua mount your leg. Now, George, I do have a chihuahua, and my chihuahua doesn't mount people's legs, but I appreciate the sentiment. So, guys, definitely make sure you mount that like button for me. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Alexandra says, Monday Locals Calls is literally the best. And she also said she got her book today, which is really exciting because you guys can all get my book too. My book came out last week. It is called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. We've got a little group that is starting to read the book, and some people have even finished it. We've got some great reviews going on Amazon. I'm really appreciative of everyone who's read the book and has taken the time out to give it a 5-star review on Amazon, because 5-star reviews only. If you've got a 4-star review, you can keep it to yourself, or any other review below that. You know, it's not that I don't respect your opinion. It's just that I don't need it in this particular circumstance. So if you guys are loving the book, please leave a review on Amazon. We will be doing a book club for Actively Unwoke, and I will be sending out an email to people who have signed up for that book club because we're going to be moving the dates. The reason that we're going to be moving the dates is because some people just still haven't gotten their books yet, and I want to make sure we can accommodate absolutely everyone who wants to be a part of the book club. Speaking of books, my guest that I'm going to be bringing on today actually has a book that's that's come out himself. It's called Runaway Masters, a true story of slavery, freedom, triumph, and tragedy beyond 1619 and 7076. And my guest today is Joseph Cotto, first Baron Cotto. He is the first Baron I've ever had on this channel. And so he'll have to explain to us how he got a Baron title, which is really cool. He is a former nationally syndicated newspaper columnist. He was also the editor of a book review. In addition to being a nonfiction author, he is the co-host of Gottfried, an online current affairs program. and he has been bestowed a Baron title, and he is going to help me walk through everything that is wrong with the Republican Party. Welcome, Joseph, to the channel. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for having me on this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I actually first started following along with you on Twitter. I think it was during impeachment trial 2.
Mhm.
And I was watching what was going on with like Liz Cheney kind of like being the havoc that Liz Cheney is, and I was like, Liz Cheney's going to lose her seat in Wyoming. And I was looking at like polling data in Wyoming. I was like, Liz Cheney's going to lose her seat. And I started saying this on my channel, and everyone was like, "No, Carlin, you are crazy. There is no way Liz Cheney's going to lose her seat in Wyoming." But like I was like, I'm pretty sure she is. And you were one of the very few people at that time who was saying exactly the same thing. So I was like, this guy's obviously smart. I obviously need to pay attention to what he's saying. And I think that that's starting to come true before our very eyes, right?
Well, it's very kind of you. I don't know quite how intelligent I am, but I do try to call things as I see them. And obviously, the whole Cheney thing it was obvious which way the wind was blowing. She really tried to more or less build a political base among people who would never vote for her. And she succeeded in doing that. And now she, I think, is just running a vanity candidacy in Wyoming. She knows she's going to lose, but it's really to create a sense of political martyrdom for her so she can, I believe, go on to host some program on CNN or
Mhm.
MSNBC and have an exalted place within the lobbying sector in DC, even though, of course, she'll be able to technically be a lobbyist to be a consultant or whatever for a few years. So I think it's all very calculated on her. And I don't think it was at the beginning. I think she thought she'd be able to maneuver this because of her last name and because of, her family's history in Wyoming. But when it turned out to be that things wouldn't work out as she anticipated, I think she went into this sort of vanity candidacy mode, and she's certainly there right now.
Yeah. Do you think she's going to run for president?
She may. I think there would be another vanity candidacy,
Yeah.
exactly in the vein of what she's doing right now. She may, particularly if Trump runs, which I imagine he will. But she it wouldn't be a very serious campaign on her part. That is. Goes without mention, but I think that she could do it to try to gum up the works within the GOP to sort of fan the flames of anger to try to expand whatever divisions are there. I can certainly see her doing that and then using this for her own personal aggrandizement within the DC economic and media bubble.
Yeah, I tend to agree with your analysis there. I mean, and I would love to see her like try to run against Trump in the primary just purely for the comedic value of the whole thing. I kind of think the same thing with Adam Kinzinger. Adam Kinzinger was threatening to run for president like a couple months ago. I was like, okay, Adam, I don't think that's going to work out for you, but you can give it a try, buddy.
He doesn't have her intelligence, though. I think
Yeah.
that if he did a vanity candidacy, it would be to less effect than if Cheney did.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Well, I have a lot of questions about what's going on with the Republican Party, but before we get into that, you have to tell us about how you got to a Baron title. You're a literal Baron.
Yeah, I am. It's something of a long story. It actually goes back to before the title came about. I used to be I used to be a journalist for the Washington Times' communities page, and a publication which came out after there was a really bad falling out at the Washington Times communities is called Communities Digital News. I think it still exists. Anyway, I did a profile of, he was still alive then, but unfortunately he's passed on since, the king of Rwanda, Kigeli V. And he liked the profile so much, his secretary general showed it to him, that the king chose to bestow a knighthood upon me, which is hereditary. And it was, quite, it was unexpected and very, very much appreciated. And what happened is that the series of articles resulted in the King's Foundation getting a bit of attention and donations. He used it for charitable endeavors, especially to help people become educated, Rwandese people, of course, become educated. And because of that, the next year, because of I guess you could say, the fallout of my series on him, I was given a barony. And he very sadly died the next year. I got the barony in 2015, the knighthood in 2014. He died in 2016. So I was one of the last people to get a barony is hereditary as well, a hereditary noble title. Of course, in the U.S., no, the law does not recognize anyone as being anything other than a commoner. So, but that's perfectly fine because it's really an honorific, and I'm very honored to have these. To have these distinctions, and I've always been, very interested in monarchy, particularly constitutional monarchism. So this really was up my alley. And people, I very rarely use the title with them. I sometimes just say I have it or appears in a professional profile, but I never ask people to use it when I'm around them. If I did, I think I might have a disfigured face by now because somebody probably would have punched me.
I think so too, but it is I kind of like how you have a little bit of fun with it and you use your profile photo and all that stuff. I think, listen, if you've got a title, you might as well work it sometimes, right?
Yeah, as long as it's done respectfully, of course.
Mhm.
And there's the image of me, which actually I believe, yeah, Jack Posobiec retweeted last night, not in a very kind way, but
Wow.
it is totally legitimate. I mean, it's the sash of the order and the medals, so that's from the knighthood, obviously, not the barony. And I'm very glad to have had these honors, as I mentioned. And I do like talking to people about monarchy as an institution, as a concept, as something that's more practical politically than a lot of people would imagine, because I think it's something that really has a lot of promise going forward, even though a lot of folks in republics would choose to disagree.
Do you think the United States would be better off as a monarchy?
Oh, without question, a
How
constitutional monarchy, not an absolute monarchy, but a constitutional one. Yes, I'm from Florida, and Florida remained loyal to Great Britain during the American Revolution. And I always say that it lost the war, but it was on the right side of the battle. So that's my sentiment there.
Awesome. Well, I live in New Hampshire and we're going to secede anyway, so you guys can do whatever you want with the rest of the nation.
The live free or die state.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to get into just a kind of general lay of the land as you see it of Republican politics and how they're set up in the current state of affairs. Because, I mean, like 6 months ago, I mean, not even then, like 3 months ago, I would have looked at the situation and said it's going to be a total like red wave in November. The Republicans, I didn't think the Republicans were going to win because they necessarily made their case or presented any strategic vision at all. I just thought the Democrats had done so horribly and Joe Biden was doing so abysmally that there was just going to be an inevitable backlash. And now I'm kind of like, I still think the Republicans are going to eke out the House in November. I question the Senate, but I'm a little bit nervous because I think we're about to be in for another summer of rage and protests and nonsense. And so I guess what is your kind of general perception of how things are going to go right now?
The Republicans have a massive built-in advantage because of how bad the economy is, because of how pessimistic people are about American so-called society, and also, of course, the Democrats have demotivated their base by not giving them the overwhelming majority of what they had
Right?
anticipated from Biden, and of course, Congress being in Democratic hands. So the Republicans have a massive built-in advantage with regard to an enthusiasm gap. However, the Republicans do, and I've discussed this on the podcast I co-host. I believe you mentioned it, Cotto Gottfried. I discussed it with Patrick Basham, who's the head of the Democracy Institute. He does some very decent polling, and he mentioned to me that the Republicans have a unique ability to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So this sort of brings us to the issues with the GOP. I think that the Republican Party will probably almost certainly not do as well as it could have. Because of some dumb nominations it's made or it's likely to make, and also issues that a lot of people in the Republican base want to be front and center, which are not issues that a lot of people are going to be voting on this year or enthused by in any positive sense at least. So I think that the Republicans will do well, not terribly, not as well as they could have though. Although I guess it's better than them just losing outright. But it's one of those situations where the GOP basically trips over its own feet.
Why does the GOP do that? I really don't understand it at all.
A lot of that's a question that that I've asked myself too many times to count, and I've spent too many hours to list, trying to think of an answer. But I, over time, I have come to a very general conclusion. There were Democratic voters really, they're very emotional, as our GOP base voters. We're talking about Democratic base voters here. The people who always turn out, the people who are highly motivated by this, that, or the other thing going on. But the Democratic base voters tend to be more tactical, even though they have their strong preferences for, say a Bernie Sanders or AOC style candidate. Most often, base voters do not choose to nominate candidates such as these because they realize they're likely to lose in the general election. So they instead choose a Democrat who is on the issues likely to give them, or at least pay lip service to, about 75% of the issues that the base cares about. And then these Democrats have a much better profile heading into the general election, and as a result, they're much more competitive against Republicans. Republicans, on the other hand, are much more animated by issues than the Democrats are. The Democrats are more about collective identity and the hierarchy of victimhood and oppression, blah, blah, blah. But Republicans are much more interested in issues. That's not to say that the Democrats don't care about issues. They do, but increasingly issues-based politicking within the Democratic ranks is subservient to identity-based politicking. But the Republicans are still big on issues-based politicking. That is the overwhelming majority of what animates Republican voters. And a lot of the Republican base believe so strongly in whatever they hold dear on any given issue that they will vote for someone knowing that person is unlikely to win in the general election, simply because that they believe it's a reflection of their values, and they want to further their values by promoting people in the public square who advocate them. Now, obviously, this is it could be a good idea if your values align with what people are generally concerned about in any given jurisdiction. It could be a terrible idea if you're basically promoting a niche issue, and the person who you nominate is going to harp about this niche issue, which is probably unpopular among the general electorate, and then the Democrat is going to be able to use that to his or her advantage. Now, I will say something else. We live in the age of the declining, vanishing swing voter, but still, even though base turnout nowadays does decide elections, there's a very small segment of the electorate which is the swing voter, and even if this segment is not big enough to sway any given election, what often happens is that the Republican nominee in, say, a certain race that's harping on this unpopular issue actually motivates more Democrats to turn out, because the Democrats listen to what this Republican candidate's going to say. And a lot of these Democrats, this is like the hardcore Democratic base that's disgusted that they're not getting 100%, they're only getting 75%. But a lot of the Democratic base will go, I wasn't going to vote for this candidate. I'm only getting 3/4 of what I want from him or her. But now I have to turn out and vote because this GOP candidate wants to make anything from the moment of conception onward the same as a 90-year-old man in the eyes of the law. So the Republicans, because they're so animated by issues, often have voters who nominate candidates that get sidetracked very easily. Whereas the Democrats, because they're more mercenary, I think by nature politically, they're more interested in this sort of conflict-oriented politics. They often make a decision to support someone that they think is likelier to give them what they want, even if it's not the entirety of what they want.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of that makes sense to me. I mean, I think, I left the left in 2020 when I kind of red pilled and woke up to the fact that I had been lied to for the majority of my life by everyone. And I think, one of the things that was very frustrating to me about the Republican Party is I never really made it over to the conservative side. I tell people I joined the Republican Party for about 15 minutes. We had a one night stand. It seemed like a great idea at the time. It was a horrible decision long term for me, you know. But one of the things that always really frustrated me with the Republican Party was I didn't feel like they had any clear, cohesive vision
Mhm.
for what they wanted to do with America. And I would even go and say, you haven't updated your party platform since 2010. And I understand that you didn't like Trump getting nominated in 2016, and so it was a little rebellion against that. And I understand in 2020 you didn't have an official convention, and so things were a little shoddy. But can't you just come together and put together some bullet points around what you want to do with the country and why you're a better choice? I don't understand why Republicans can't articulate this.
It's a very good question. I think that, Trump made a very good decision by not having a platform in 2020. That was the best idea. And that's what he had, certain principles, ideas that he wanted the GOP to focus on, and that was it. That's what the GOP should do going forward. The platform is a wasted paper. Even Bob Dole said something to that effect in 1996 after he had been nominated by the Republican Party for the presidential race. So I think that the platform is a waste of time. I don't support it playing any sort of serious role in GOP politics. I don't blame you for leaving the Republican Party, and I say that as a
Mhm.
lifelong Republican. But I think that the GOP is in a unique situation because the bottom line is that the Democrats, them choosing to adopt this new form of leftism, can't really call it liberalism.
No.
It's not even what you would call modern American liberalism, let alone classical liberalism. It's really a form of, you could call it progressivism. It's not quite Marxism, even though it has some roots in Marxism, but it also has roots in postmodernism. And it also comes out of a very fractured and divided society that has no core identity. So what the modern Democratic Party has become is a mixture of many different things. It's certainly not one thing, but it's very bad. And what it's promoting more or less is perpetual conflict, where members of groups are at odds with each other simply because they're a member of this group or that group. And obviously, that's going to create severe problems as time goes on. So that's where the Democrats are. And because the Democrats have grown this extreme, they have created a large pool of people who are disaffected from them, who are tired of this. And the Republicans, naturally, even if not on paper, they're going to absorb these people because these folks are going to give the Republicans their votes probably more often than not. And so the GOP really is in a unique position to become a party that's a big tent, really, a big tent coalition. And traditionally, when some folks have said the GOP should become a big tent, it was code for, support amnesty for illegal immigrants, blah, blah, blah. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the GOP needs to be a big tent for everyone who is alienated by what the Democrats have become. And that's its only way forward, because talking about conservatism, I've never been a member of the conservative movement myself. I don't think it's conserved a darn thing. And a lot of it is just, I find to be not in tune with reality. Now, the conservative movement has a very small base in America, but it's an outsized base in its influence because you see it on cable news, talk radio, sometimes social media. But very few Americans, and not even a majority of Republicans, are simpatico with movement conservatism, which Donald Trump was a big reaction to. The movement conservatism despised him. Movement conservatism basically is Ronald Reagan philosophy merged with George W. Bushism. It has sort of an old school view of society with regard to social conservatism, but not old school as in going back to the 50s necessarily, but basically it means beating the drum against abortion, and at least until a few years ago, gay marriage. Then it has to do with military interventionism to promote democracy. And then finally, fiscal conservatism, which traditionally has entailed free trade and low taxes, which brought about a need or desire among a lot of business people for cheap labor. And that's where legal immigration comes in. So this movement conservatism is not terribly popular among Republicans. It's deeply unpopular throughout the country. And it's withering on the vine. And I think that's a very good thing. So the GOP cannot make its identity based upon being a true conservative, whatever that's supposed to mean. And it's going to have to adopt this big tent approach that I mentioned if it wants to be successful. It's doing that to an extent, but there are certainly some elements within the GOP that have deep resistance towards that. And you see these elements very much flexing their muscle with regard to the abortion debate that is most
Yes.
unfortunately going on now.
Yeah, and I want to get into the abortion debate specifically in a second, but I want to go back to this idea of being a big tent because, when I decided to join the Republican Party, I was touring around the country doing rallies during 2020. We were like some of the only people out there doing rallies. And I was just basically trying to get people to vote for Donald Trump, like as a walkaway Democrat, and get more people away from the Democratic Party because I was like, Biden is going to be an absolute nightmare. This is not a good thing. And then Trump actually really won me over with banning critical race theory in the federal government, which is, of course, like my number one issue that I care about. So I was like, all right, Trump, you won my vote. And then I really enjoyed like being around Republicans at all these events I was at, and it really did feel like a big tent. And so I decided before the election that I was going to become a Republican, but never quite got down to like town hall to fill out the
Mhm.
paperwork. And then I went to CPAC about like 2 months after Trump left office or whatever, and it had kind of that same feeling. And I was like, okay, it seems like this big tent vibe has solidified in the Republican Party. They still see Trump as their leader. I felt still completely welcome. I felt like,
Mhm.
I didn't agree with everything that they thought, but I agreed with enough that I was willing to compromise on some other issues because again, it was like for the greater good of defeating the left. And then I kind of started seeing the religious right pop in
Mhm.
again. And I don't
Mhm.
know if that's just a frame of reference that I have. I happen to see more of it on Twitter than the
Mhm.
average bear. But I was definitely told in no uncertain terms by very prominent, like conservative influencers, you are not welcome. Get out of the Republican Party. To the point where, like, Lauren Witzke from like Delaware called for the deportation of my husband because my husband's an immigrant. And I
Mhm.
was like, okay, I'm not wanted here. Libertarians, what's up? I agree with you on more stuff anyway. But like I actually really am concerned, to be serious, about the influence of what I see as like the religious right and religious fundamentalism, because although I absolutely believe that everyone should be able to worship and practice whatever religion they want, it's none of my business. I don't think it's a smart idea to push religious values into politics. What do you think?
Oh, I think it's a terrible idea to push theological values into politics. It always causes conflict, and there's more than enough of that going on right now. I think that the GOP, the religious right, I know for a fact because I've been tracking the demography of it for years. I've never liked it at all. Even though I'm a lifelong Republican, I've always been very, very much not enamored of it, and that's being extremely kind. But the religious right is dying out within the GOP. It is a smaller and smaller portion of each passing year. What it is that as it dies out, its members become more reactionary because they recognize
Mm.
that they're losing power. And so they get more vocal. And you see that with this abortion issue. That's why they're so happy about it, because they felt like they were languishing. In 2020, Trump really didn't talk about religion. There was no pro life plank in a GOP platform. They were really scared. And now this whole Roe thing makes them feel relevant again. Also, a lot of these people supported Amy Coney Barrett simply on the basis of her being very religious and having adopted kids from the third world. And they really these people really engage in identity politics of their own, even though it's much more issue oriented than what you see on the left. It's a unique form of identity politicking, but when all is said and done, these folks are diminishing in the GOP, and they know they're losing influence, and that's why they're getting more. That's why they're getting much more reactionary. Now, I think that what you see online on Twitter, that's the people who are on Twitter, generally speaking, are the extremes of any group,
Yes.
because they're the people who feel most strongly about their views. And I'm not talking about everyone. We're talking about people who engage in politics on Twitter, and so the people who you see there are people who you'd see making a big deal, even if they were only 5% of the GOP and 0.00005% of the country. And those folks, I wouldn't really, I don't think they represent much of anything in terms of values and attitudes of the Republican Party. They are around though, and they do want to make their voice heard, because they do believe correctly that they're losing the culture war. They're losing, and influence within the Republican Party, and those folks are going to be very angry as a result of that. And if somebody comes up to them and says, "Well, I'm a Republican, but I disagree with you on abortion rights," they see it as basically a traitor within their ranks, even though they realize that they don't have as much control over their ranks as they used to. And they try to get their friends on Twitter to attack this person who is a member of the out group. However, even though it's not technically true because it's a fellow Republican, but whatever. And they do this because they want to consolidate whatever control they have left over their wing of the GOP, and they want to try to use their control to influence as much of the Republican agenda as possible. But they are losing, and that's why they're acting as they are. If they were winning, if they were comfortable in their position, they would be basically just laughing off pro-choice Republicans and others. But since they're on the outs, they're screaming, shouting, all that stuff.
Well, that actually makes me feel a lot better, and I've definitely been on the receiving end of a couple of those hate mobs on Twitter that's been basically made me go like, "What the heck are you guys doing?" And the thing that drives me most crazy about those hate mobs is I'm like, do you guys understand that elections are won by getting votes?
Mhm.
And you need every vote and you can't afford to be messing around with this. And then they'll flat out say, they're like, we don't care about winning elections. Our values are more important. And I'm like, okay, just hand everything to the woke left. Like,
Mhm.
congratulations. We're going to start our long, slow descent into socialism as a result of your Twitter fight. Um, but let's get into the big issue that's kind of going on right now, which is of course Roe. And I was sitting back enjoying all the infighting in the Democratic Party. I think many of us were enjoying the infighting. Like none of the progressives were happy. Black Lives Matter
Mhm.
got nothing. It didn't look like Biden was going to cancel student debt, which of course now he's probably going to some extent or another. Like it was like they were all at war with each other and no one was happy and they weren't able to consolidate around anything. And then the Roe draft got leaked. And I was probably one of the people that was screaming most loudly on Twitter when the hearing happened. I was like, "You guys are idiots!" Like, because they were all celebrating. They're like, "Roe versus Wade is going to get overturned," and all this
Mhm.
stuff. And I was like, "You guys are morons! If you think that this is not going to come back to bite you, you're going to solidify the entire Democratic base around like their primary issue that they treat with a religious reverence." And, as a woman who came up on the Democratic side and
Mhm.
am pro choice and know how important that issue is to so many women, I was like, this is going to bite you in ways that you have not even anticipated yet. And I've gotten really frustrated both when the hearing happened and then when that draft got released because I think we started to see the Democrats start to come together and kind of put aside some of their other infighting
Mhm.
and squabbling to solidify around this issue. How do you perceive the situation?
It's very difficult. I think it's not to the Republicans' advantage in the short or the long run, but it's going to hurt them much worse in the long run than it will in the short run. But looking at the short run, we can't even say technically, with any degree of certainty, what's likely to happen because the ruling hasn't come down yet. What we've seen is like sort of the pre-game show, which didn't look terribly good for the Republicans. But if the ruling actually comes down and Roe actually goes the way of the dinosaurs, it will certainly gin up Democratic turnout, people who were just depressed with Biden, understandably so, particularly college educated women who live in districts and in states that are going to be very important this year. And they will vote for the Democrats out of spite, out of pure spite. And, I certainly don't agree with their politics, even though I am pro choice, but it's difficult to blame them because I, as a Republican, I could understand their anger because this is like, and I'm not a gun fanatic myself, a lot of Republicans are. I could see how angry Republicans would be if the Supreme Court said the Second Amendment no longer allows for an individual to to own or carry a gun unless he's part of a state-regulated militia. The Republicans themselves would be furious. It would motivate them to vote tremendously just to give the finger to the Democrats. So I think the same thing is true of Democrats who are pro-choice. I think that the GOP harping on this issue has been done traditionally just to get a base of voters who respond to red meat. Many of them are not terribly, to be blunt, intelligent, and they are highly emotional. And they really, really, really are enamored of this abortion issue. So the GOP recognizes they could use these people, and they have used them for now generations on end. But of course, the one might say the bill is coming due with this, and so we'll see how that functions in November. I think that just looking at things, I cannot give any sort of serious prediction now, but looking at how things have developed outside of the abortion issue in American politics and the economy, it seems to me that the GOP probably won't get as much flack for this as they would in almost any other election cycle, simply because things are so bad. But it most definitely will inspire Democratic women who would not have voted to turn out in favor of the Democratic candidate simply out of spite. And any Republican who thinks that's not going to happen is fooling him or herself. And this is why avoiding issues like such as abortion is a great idea in campaigns, because it tends to not only motivate your own supporters, but it motivates people who despise what you stand for. So it's certainly a double-edged sword. And I think the GOP will do well enough in November, as I said, but abortion would be one of the reasons as to why it would not. And I'm not saying the GOP should adopt, I would love if it did, but I'm not saying that it would be tactically a good idea for the GOP to adopt a pro-choice stance. I would really like it if it did, but it's not going to happen. What it should do is have no stance at all on abortion, which was the case in 2020. We just had the statement of principles and all that stuff, other stuff falls by the wayside. So I think, there is room. Look, there's always bipartisanship today, but there is room for a national compromise. I think on pregnancy termination, where it's okay throughout the embryonic phase, but in the fetal phase, it's restricted unless it's to save the life of the mother, something like that. I would add a whole bunch of other caveats as well, but I probably wouldn't get them in the compromise. I personally think it should be legal until viability, but I think that this would be a good compromise, embryonic abortions, but generally not fetal ones. It would probably unite about 80% of the country. But because the Democrats and the Republicans right now are interested in political maximalism, they want to take as much as they can. They're not interested in cutting deals because the country's so polarized. Each party's responding to that in a host of ways. A compromise to keep abortion legal nationwide through the first trimester is very unlikely. The only way I could see it happening is if the justices come to some sense and say it will be lawful through the first trimester nationally, but after that, it's left up to the states. In that case, most of, I think, the conflict, it'd still be there, but it'd be greatly blunted. And I will just say something else about the abortion issue, something I know about quite well. It has become less prevalent in society in recent years because so many people now have access to the morning after pill. That's the biggest thing. It's been over the counter now for several years, and that cut the abortion rate tremendously. And other types of a newer type of abortion is abortion by pill. It's no longer, in most cases, the sort of grisly surgical abortion that most people imagine. And the abortion by pill is only during the embryonic stage. So that actually makes it so the kind of abortions that really turn people's stomach, the fetal sort, are not nearly as commonplace as they once were. So abortion already is changing, what one would say, in what one would call a pro-life direction. But a lot of anti-abortion folks just can't stand that. A lot of them want the morning after pill to be criminalized because they think it kills a baby. And those people, they really can't be reasoned with. I really think they hold their views because of some deep-seated personal issues that have nothing to do with pregnancy at all.
Yeah, I mean, I know, and I've already seen. I forget what state it was in, but someone in some state already started to introduce legislation to try to ban the morning
Idaho.
after pill. Idaho. Of course, it was
Mhm.
Idaho.
Mhm.
No, I was like, this is already starting to go off the rails as a consequence of even bringing this case in the first place. But no, I agree with pretty much everything that you just said. I think that one of the smartest compromises the GOP could have offered to the Democrats, and this is in my fantasy land, I know that this is never going to happen in reality, but I think if the GOP had tried to compromise with the Democrats to put forward some sort of bill to say, you know what, it's legal in the first trimester, that's a couple of exceptions after that for rape, incest, life of the mother, whatever else, but we're going to really lock it down and we're going to put limitations on abortion. I really think that would have been one of the smartest moves the GOP could have
Absolutely.
ever made, and it would have appealed to so many people, right?
Absolutely, without question. It would have really neutralized this abortion issue. I mean, not totally, but to a large extent. But like I said, we're in the age of political maximalism. So you see either side really going to the wall in service of its base, which obviously doesn't represent where voters are on the whole. But that's the point is to placate the base. It's sort of like the Democrats going into this business of there's no such thing as a biological male or female, blah, blah, blah. Most people think it's crazy, but their hardcore base loves this stuff now. They didn't love it 10 years ago, but they love it now. And so the Democrats placate them at every turn because they want them to turn out. And there is something else to that, I suppose, that relates to abortion. The bill which the Democrats put forth to legalize abortion nationwide, regardless of Roe, it was it allowed abortion to happen for such a long period that obviously it wasn't going to work.
Right.
But it didn't even mention women in the bill, and it goes to show how the Democrats are, even on this women's issue, sort of erasing biological females to placate their base. And it's yet another example of this political maximalism. You really do see it on both sides.
Oh no, you absolutely. I mean, I think that each party is kind of a carbon copy of each other. They're two sides
Mhm.
of the same coin, and they're both kind of playing the same game. I also want to just emphasize the point you made about just like not speaking to the issue in the platform entirely. I think that that would actually be the smartest thing to do. In fact, I'm going to the Libertarian National Convention as an elected delegate in a little over a week, and they're going to be removing. Well, my understanding is this is the plan. They're going to be removing any mention of abortion from the platform at
Mhm.
all, because and they're basically going to say there are good people on both sides of the issue. We're not going to take a stance. It's not the most important thing to us. There are other things that we're worrying about. And so we're just not going to take a side. And so the Libertarian Party is going to be removing it from its party platform entirely. Not that that's going to lead to libertarians winning elections. I'm realistic about that. But I do think it's an incredibly smart thing to do.
It absolutely is. And the libertarians have even been divided over abortion in the past. I guess this is how they're resolving it. But
Yep.
it is a smart move. Of course, third parties in a polarized environment such as our own will never succeed. But they're sort of like pressure groups on the sides to force one party in a certain direction or against certain in opposition to a certain direction. So maybe the libertarians will have some positive influence on the GOP here. I hope they do. But Trump's move in 2020 to not have this platform was a great idea. It creates problems, and we see these problems now rearing their ugly head. And I think that looking at what a lot of people who are in the hardcore, I'm not some people who dislike abortion. I'm talking people who are hardcore, single issue anti-abortion. They also dislike in vitro fertilization, embryonic stem cell research, and Plan B. It's more with these people than just people not getting abortions. That's the thing. It doesn't stop there. They remind me very much. I've interacted with them of the woke left. They tend to call you all sorts of names. They use moral grandstanding. They deflect from your point with arguments that are intended to invoke people's passions, and it's very they're very similar to the left in these regards. And I really think that at the core of this whole thing, it's not abortion with them. I think they really dislike, some people just say women, but it's more than that, I believe. They dislike women and men having options when it comes to reproduction because they want people more or less to be slaves to their biology. It could be because these people think their God demands it. It could be because these people think it creates a more traditional and therefore functional society. It could be just because some of these people are misanthropic and maybe psychos. Who knows? But I think that the way with the hardcore pro-lifers in quotes, it goes beyond abortion. It's not simply
Yeah.
an abortion matter.
No, I completely agree with you. I have a question about how you kind of see the Democrats playing out the abortion issue leading up to November. Because, I think that obviously they tried to get this bill passed and they failed. I don't think that this is the last time they're going to try something. I think that they're going to put the pressure on all the way up through November. I think they're going to try again and again. How do you kind of see this playing out on the Democratic side?
The Democrats, I don't think ever intended to get anything passed. Now,
Yeah.
I think they want I think I'm certain they want the anger among their base to drag out through the election cycle. Because if they resolve it now, it's close to over, and the voters who are really aggravated over this and who weren't going to vote, who are there are untold millions of them. They're still not going to vote if the abortion issue is resolved ahead of the election. But I think the Democrats will try something again closer to the election. Whether they try to go for something that could actually pass, like keeping abortion legal through the totality of the embryonic phase, is a good question. If they want to keep abortion legal, they should do that. If they don't want to keep abortion legal, they just want to really use this as an issue to agitate their base. So it turns out, I think they'll bring back the same law that just failed. But I don't think they've seen the last of it. I think that what they should consider doing is passing a law to make it so, the FDA has recently allowed abortion by pill to be sent through the mail, and as far as the federal government's concerned, you don't have to have it be prescribed in person. So I think that what should be done is a federal law to make this regulation codified, and that would certainly be productive in ensuring abortion access. But I don't think the Democrats are operating as honest brokers here. I think a lot of them actually like this, particularly the Democratic
Yeah.
hierarchy. I think a lot of them probably love it because now their base, which basically was giving them an obscene gesture, here is being agitated to vote for them. So I really want to see abortion access preserved. That's my primary concern here. But obviously, the GOP and the Democrats are not are not playing ball. Each one is focused on its own bases, concerns, and that's not to the benefit of whatever passes for society on the whole.
You know, I have to give them credit. This was a masterful chess move on their
Mhm,
part to leak this draft. And I'm of the opinion that I don't think this was some rogue Supreme Court clerk that just leaked this
mhm.
draft by happenstance. I think that there were people involved in this. I think it was a concerted effort. I mean, I could be just maybe I'm becoming a conspiracy theorist. I don't know. But it's just like there are just too many upsides to them leaking this draft in terms of bringing their base together, getting to create a whole new summer of love. It's basically like rolling out exactly the same playbook that they
Mhm.
ran in 2020, except we're no longer in a pandemic. But I still think we're going to see protests and all sorts of shenanigans. And it's like, this is exactly what they wanted.
Absolutely. And it really galvanizes talking about, protests, which you really haven't seen much of yet because the ruling's not handed down. But if it is handed down, and well, it will be regardless of what it says, but when it is handed down, if it holds that Roe v. Wade is unconstitutional, then you'll see the problems. And the group that'll be most energized by this, obviously, college educated women, disproportionately white ones, between the ages of 18 and 35, probably up to 40, actually. And this is the precise demographic the Democrats were concerned would not turn out. And there are other demographics they're concerned won't turn out too, but this is a big one. And so this abortion issue would certainly galvanize the subset of the Democratic base to vote in November. And I can see the Democrats, acting in being dishonest brokers and promoting these bills that they know have no chance of passing because it just further agitates their base. But if they really wanted to keep abortion legal, they would, I think, figure something out that Manchin could probably get behind, and they would eliminate the filibuster for this issue alone, not all issues, as they wanted to do in the past. But it probably, maybe not even Manchin, it'd probably be Cinema
I
and
think it would be cinema.
Murkowski.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe Susan Collins. I could see those three. That would be it. And I could see them eliminating the filibuster for this limited abortion related issue. I don't think they would eliminate it for any, certainly not as a generality. And I'm very thankful for that it has not been eliminated.
So can they do that? Can they eliminate it just for this one vote?
They can. They can
Huh.
for this subject matter. They can. They wanted to eliminate the filibuster on the whole of Democrats, but then they sort of quote unquote compromise, said no, we'll just eliminate it to get the For the People Act through. But thankfully that failed. That would have been a nightmare beyond parallel if that had passed. But they can eliminate it for a limited purpose. And I think on abortion, if there is an embryonic a bill to legalize nationwide embryonic abortions, I think they would. There's a very good chance of it getting knocked down for this alone. The problem with this actually is that even though it would pass the Senate, I'm very sure of that, it might not pass the House because a lot of Democratic
Huh.
radicals in the House would go nuts,
Right.
saying no, 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 no. It has to go further. It has to go to viability, to beyond viability, to the point where the infant comes out of the mother. A lot of them would be this, this radical, and they would probably knock it down, or there's a good chance they would knock it down because they would be so disgusted by there not being as much abortion protection as they like. So the Democrats could get something through the Senate. They really have to strong arm to get it through the House, but it all begins with them proposing a reasonable bill that could pass. And the bill that they proposed that just got voted down certainly was not what was necessary.
All right. Well, more to come on the Roe issue, and I guess we'll see what happens when the decision gets handed down in just a couple of short weeks. And I don't know, guys, go buy another gun if you live in a major city because I think it might not be the worst idea in the world. But I want to switch gears for a second because tomorrow we have this primary in Pennsylvania, and I'm loving it. Joseph, I am
Mhm.
loving the Twitter drama. I am loving the infighting. What I'm really loving is honestly the GOP establishment kind of showing themselves to the
Mhm.
base and basically trying to dictate who the nominee is going to be. And it's like let's just start. Oh, actually, hang on. Let me do the super chat from Brian first. Brian says viability is largely determined by the hospital for abortion. We'll go into that another day, Brian, but thank you for the super chat. So in this issue with Pennsylvania, where it seems like Kathy Barnett was surging in the polls, and then I saw a poll from Newsmax earlier saying Oz was surging in the polls, which I don't believe because Greg Kelly has been really coming out hard smearing Barnett with as much willpower as he can. What do you think is going to happen in Pennsylvania tomorrow?
I think Oz will win. The Pennsylvania GOP establishment chose not to officially endorse anyone, but they really support David McCormick, who's a Wall Streeter, an actual Wall Streeter. Barnett said she's on Wall Street, but she was actually in Kansas working in a financial services firm there. But McCormick was an actual Wall Streeter, and he decided to run in Pennsylvania for the U.S. Senate. The GOP establishment in Pennsylvania is very comfortable with that, but most GOP voters aren't there. And Oz came in the race as someone who is very friendly with Donald Trump, and he eventually got Trump's nomination. They've known each other for many years. They spent time together in Florida. So Oz getting the nomination from Trump was a surprise, also because Oz has the most crossover appeal by far, particularly with women who are not terribly ideological. His show was disproportionately viewed by women, and he's probably the most female-friendly GOP candidate in quite some time. And so Oz, Trump endorsed him, I think, because of their long-term acquaintanceship, and also because he recognized him as being most electable. Then Barnett really was a non-factor until that debate performance she had, where she harped on this abortion issue, and she got the hardcore anti-abortion faction of the Pennsylvania Republicans behind her. But then the Club for Growth started supporting her, probably because it sees her as being malleable. And then after that, she started getting some support from Republicans who dislike Trump, and I think they're just using her as a proxy against Trump. She has a lot of support in the conservative Twitter sphere and social media sphere. Moreover, I think, though, that Oz will win. I don't know if it'll be a very convincing win. It's certainly going to be a plurality victory, regardless of who wins. But I think Oz is the favorite to win. I don't think Barnett would be able to win a general election. Her personality, some of her views, they're very much tailor-made for a Republican running in Mississippi or Alabama, not Pennsylvania. I actually spent my middle school years in Pennsylvania, so I'm a bit familiar with the people and the culture. And she's not it. She wouldn't do well statewide. But Oz, I think, would, although Fetterman is someone who motivates the Democratic base. He also alienates whatever moderates are left. So that's the double-edged sword of the Democratic side. But I do see the Democratic base in Pennsylvania being quite motivated this year, although not as much as they were in 2020 for sure. So I think Oz will win. He's slightly favored in the general election, but that's not saying much. It's really we'll wait and see what happens thing. But I'm very certain that Barnett would lose, and not by a recount margin.
You're breaking my heart here because I really want Kathy to win for no other reason. Like, this is obviously, I don't live in Pennsylvania, so not my monkeys, not my circus, but I kind of would honestly love the base just to kind of give the finger to the establishment and say, no, you can't tell us who to vote for. We're going to vote for who we want to vote for. If Oz wins, I guess, it is what it is. And I absolutely agree with you that he got the endorsement from Trump because, like, they're friends, and Trump likes to do favors for his friends that are loyal to him because Trump appreciates loyalty more than almost anything else. I don't know, though. Like, what do you make of the fact that Jack Posobiec and kind of some of his friends on Twitter have come out so strongly against Oz? And how do you think that's factored in?
It's very strange. I don't think it's factored into the minds of most Pennsylvanians, or most Pennsylvania Republicans. I think, though, that it's unique because the hatred they display towards Oz is extreme. I think perhaps some of it has to do with him being Turkish. I'm quite sure a lot of it has to do with him being Turkish. I think in part is ethnic hatred. Also, there's likely an anti-Islamic angle. And I say, I'm not I'll put it this way, I'm not a follower of the religion of peace, to say the absolute least. But at the same time, Oz is a Sufist Muslim. They're a very mystical, inward-looking, comprehensively moderate denomination of Islam. A Sufist Muslim getting elected to high office is definitely not a problem. problem. But I think that for some of these people, it is to them, even if it's not in reality. And I think also some of them, I'm not exactly sure who exactly, don't want Trump to run again, and they want his endorsement to fail so his image is weakened within the GOP. I think there's a lot of moving parts here. And I think that some of them just figure that they'll throw in with Barnett to see how great their influence is. And if she wins, then they have a bigger claim to influence peddling within the conservative media sphere.
I think that kind of makes sense. I definitely think that they're playing games just to see what they can get away with. I also kind of really wonder what Dr. Oz did. Like, what was the moment that Jack Posobiec really decided to go with Dr. Oz? Like, what did Dr. Oz do to him? I feel like there's a story there, and I want to know what it is.
I think I think there could be a story. It could just be basically bigotry, but who knows? I think that what I do see being displayed toward Oz by a lot of people is just really over the top. I mean, if you don't like the guy, that's fine. But the level of hatred that's being thrown his direction, it's like he just came out and said that he joined the Muslim Brotherhood or something crazy like that. It makes no sense.
Well, I got to push back on you a little bit there because, like, Sean Hannity did a blatant hit piece on Kathy Barnett. Rick Grinnell tweeted out this video that took clips blatantly out of context to make her look like a leftist. I mean, they're coming at her pretty hard, and to the point where CNN actually did an honest fact check over some of the things they've been saying about Barnett. And I was, I mean, it kind of felt like to me watching what the Democrats did to Bernie Sanders in 2016 when they completely sabotaged him getting the nomination because they wanted it to be Hillary. I felt like I was reliving this, watching what they're trying to do to Kathy Barnett.
There's no question that, and this is one of the first signs it's ever happened, there's an alliance between Trump world and the Republican establishment to go after Barnett. Even though the Club for Growth was traditionally has been aligned with the GOP establishment, is solidly pro Barnett. Go figure. But I think there's otherwise outside of the Club for Growth sphere, the GOP establishment is dead set against Barnett, as is Trump world, and so they're using whatever they think they can in order to detract from her candidacy. And they're doing that because they know she's extremely likely to lose, and also she's extremely likely to make comments on the campaign trail, which other Republicans in other states have to disavow. So I think they see in her a huge problem, not both a problem right now and a problem waiting to happen. But I'm not surprised to see them going scorched earth against her. I think that she never expected really to get this popular,
Oh yeah.
and and now that she has, she's facing scrutiny which she was unprepared for, and she would not be someone who would hold up well in the general election. I'm certain of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's probably true. I think it absolutely would be an uphill battle, and I think that would be a little bit unfortunate. I have to appreciate the irony of Donald Trump saying that someone with mean tweets can't possibly win an election. It's like, dude, come on, have some self-awareness here. You know who you are. But speaking of Trump, I want to kind of transition to 2024. And you said earlier that you thought that Trump would probably run again. How do you see 2024 shaping up?
Well, I think that Trump can certainly win the Electoral College. He's not the only Republican who could, but I think he'll be the nominee, and he's sort of the natural, the natural choice for the next election cycle, for the next presidential election cycle. I would say that he is not likely to win back Georgia or Arizona. I know a lot of people think he is, but especially in Georgia, the demographic shift, politically speaking, has been so massive that it's very difficult, will be very difficult for him to win by 24. That being said, he can win, while probably losing the popular vote by repeating 2016 just without Arizona and Georgia, maybe adding another state, such as probably wouldn't be Maine. Could be New Hampshire of
It
all
could be.
places. Yeah. And I'm sure you'll hold North Carolina. If Nevada gets its vote by mail situation in order, I think he could win Nevada as well. But I don't see him winning back Georgia or Arizona, even if they both go Republican this year. And that's, a damn big if.
Yeah. Well, I would love to see Trump run again in
Mhm.
2024, even just for the comedic value of it.
That'll be
Um,
funny.
it would absolutely be funny. Who do you think the Democrats are going to run? Because it doesn't really seem like they have many options available to them.
Well, I think the plan, I've said this since 2020, the plan was always for Kamala Harris to take over after the midterms because the Democrats always knew, judging by history, they weren't going to do well. They probably think they were going to be facing, I'm sure they didn't think they were going to be facing the sort of nightmare they're facing now. But I think the plan was always for Biden to resign after the midterms, hand it over to Kamala, give her the advantage of incumbency. Incumbents rarely lose. And this way she'd be stronger for 2024. But since she's more unpopular than Biden is, I think that plan's gone awry, and they're going to either run Biden again, which would be a nightmare for them, or he will announce he's not running, and somebody else like Buttigieg or I mean, some people even said Meghan Markle, but I could see that
Oh
happening.
God.
Oh, I could definitely see it happening. It wouldn't be a good thing, but I could see it happening. I think somebody like one of these two will come about. Somebody who's in touch with modern progressive SJW sensibilities more than anything else. I think that this is the likely turn of events. I think it's profoundly unlikely that a heterosexual white male will be the Democratic nominee unless it's Biden. But I think that the Democrats have a very, very, very weak bench when it comes to anyone who could take over. They don't have another Obama waiting in the wings, that's for certain. And as a result of that, the Republicans obviously benefit quite a bit, although they can never rest on their laurels, especially because, as I mentioned, the GOP has a unique ability to screw itself over.
What do you think the odds are that we get Trump versus Hillary part 2?
The odds are not inconsiderable. I don't think it's likely, but it's not like something that's impossible. I think she would tailor make herself to whatever she thinks the base wants, and Trump would. I think this would probably be one of the best scenarios for him because I'm sure he would defeat her. Who knows? He might even win Arizona in that case. But I think it's definitely possible. I don't think it's likely. I would like to see it, but I don't think it's going to happen. What I think, although it could happen, it's not that I'm certain it's not going to happen or anything like that. I think that when it comes to Trump and 2024, regardless of whoever it is that runs against him, it's going to be a situation where there are no debates. I the RNC has been pretty clear about forecasting that there's not going to be any debate between Trump and whoever the Democrat is, which is for the best because the debates certainly aren't adding to the scenery. I'll put it that way, and I think it'll be better for everyone if this charade just doesn't go on. If this debate where people come together to convince open-minded, the country is not in that position anymore. These debates really matter to the extent that they once did in forming opinions. They're basically the debates just a mix between WWE cage matches and political infomercials at this point. So I'm glad to say that it's profoundly unlikely there will be a debate between Trump and whoever runs against him.
Oh, come on. I love the debates. It's like theater. It's like we all
It
get
is.
our popcorn, we get our whiskey, we have a good night on Twitter. It's amazing.
Mhm. The debates are now entertainment. That's a very good way of putting it. Although I think that for the Republicans, there's always a greater chance of something going wrong than there is for the Democrats because of who moderates the debates, really.
Mm.
I mean, it's no secret that most of the moderators of these debates do not like the Republican and the questions they ask the Democrats and how the questions are posed, even if it's not the actual wording, does tend to benefit the Democratic side. So it's a good strategy for the GOP to avoid the debates.
So I want to get your opinion on what issues the Republicans should be focusing on if they want their best chances not only in 2022 and 2024. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased because I think they should be focusing on education and the insanity going on in the schools and trying to wean away those college educated women who might otherwise, vote Democrat. And I think that we saw the results of that in Virginia with the election of Glenn Youngkin. And I think Youngkin basically tripped and lucked himself into that issue. I don't think that was a strategic move, but I think we did see the effectiveness of it. What issues do you think they should be focusing on?
I think that focusing on education related issues, which obviously goes straight into CRT, is the winner. That should be the golden apple in a manner of speaking for this election cycle, and I'm sure the next one. As a matter of fact, James Lindsay had a meme where he talked about all these issues that the GOP should be focusing on. Then it showed them getting distracted by abortion.
Yep.
But yeah, the GOP really should be focusing on opposing CRT in education, but also in employment, in society, generally speaking. That's the key. DeSantis in Florida has done a very good job of that. He's signed some really outstanding bills. He did sign an abortion ban of 15 weeks, which is not terribly radical, but some people are trying to drag him further into the abortion debate. Thankfully, he's not taking the bait, but it goes to show some Republicans want to distract from these, very important high profile issues with losers. So I think that the big thing for the GOP is focusing obviously on CRT. Then, of course, although equal with this, is the economy, trying to figure out some means of clamping down on inflation before even talking about tax decreases. Talking about decreasing inflation should be, priority number one. And then there's immigration, which is a huge, huge matter now. It's growing worse, obviously, under Biden. So I think you have these three things that the GOP should be focused on. And hopefully, it is disciplined enough to really hone in on these matters. Talking about, quote unquote, babies being quote unquote killed by Plan B is definitely not where it's at.
Mm-hmm. What races are you really watching for 2022 November?
The Pennsylvania one, obviously, that's at the top of the heap. I'm also looking at the Georgia gubernatorial election. Pennsylvania senatorial election. I'm also looking at the Georgia gubernatorial election because it goes to it really will determine whether or not Georgia is even still competitive for the GOP. Number one, but number two, if Kemp wins the nomination, it'll be interesting to see how many Republicans in Georgia sit out the gubernatorial race, if not the election cycle entirely. And if Perdue wins the nomination, it'll be interesting to see how a Trump-backed candidate fares against Stacey Abrams. So the Georgia gubernatorial election will be fascinating. I can't tell you exactly what will happen, but I think if Kemp is the GOP's nominee, a lot of people, hundreds of thousands of Republicans will sit that out. I, by the way, did not think this would happen last year. I thought they would all show up to vote because Trump endorsed Perdue and Loeffler in the runoff. But a lot of Georgia Republicans simply didn't vote, even though Trump gave his blessing to these two Republican nominees, because they felt that the state party had screwed them over. And so a lot of these Republicans in Georgia still feel that way. So if Kemp is the nominee and Trump doesn't endorse him, will these people show up? It will go to show the institutional power of not only the Georgia Republican apparatus, but the Republican Party without Trump. And I think that I know a lot of people probably don't want to hear this, but I think that Abrams stands a very decent chance of winning in the event that Kemp is the nominee. She also stands a very decent chance of winning in the event that Perdue is the nominee. There will be some Republicans who just hate Trump so much that they don't vote for Perdue, and then there will be people who just decide, I guess, have spite to vote for Abrams, but I think that'd be very minimal. But considering how much Georgia has changed in such a short period, it's very possible that even against someone with Trump's endorsement, Abrams wins. So we'll see. But obviously, there's a senatorial race going on in Georgia, too, between Walker and Warnock. That's sort of second fiddle, in my opinion. But that'll be interesting to see as well. Then there are what's going on in Florida is not very interesting. It's going to be an easy win for the Republicans. But what's going on in the Rust Belt is intriguing, particularly in Wisconsin. Ron Johnson running for re-election. I think he should be able to pull that out. But if it's too close or if he somehow loses, it certainly puts the GOP's future in the Rust Belt in question, although I don't think that will happen. Then there's an interesting series of races in Michigan, the gubernatorial race and the senatorial race, and then looking at the congressional races happening as well. Michigan is unique to the abortion issue because there is a law in Michigan which outlaws all abortions, and if Roe v. Wade is struck down, then that law goes into effect, and Michigan has a very pro-choice electorate. So looking at what happens in Michigan will be interesting to test just how serious this abortion issue is electorally going forward, and it would have lessons for Republicans and Democrats alike. Finally, I would say Nevada is interesting because they have a situation where it appears that the Republicans are profoundly competitive. Although they have this terrible situation with vote by mail there, which certainly lends itself to, I'll be charitable and say, unfairness. And that it will be interesting to see if that matter can be overcome by the Republican nominee. So I'm looking at Nevada as well. And there are, of course, interesting races going on elsewhere. Arguably, any race is interesting. But those are the ones that I really have my eyes on.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think Stacey Abrams is going to take Georgia, and I think that was actually one of the first thoughts when the Roe draft got leaked. I was like, all right, Georgia solidified. There it goes. Stacey Abrams is going to be governor. But I mean, honestly, I sometimes think that some of these wake-up calls are good for the GOP. At least, I mean, I would hope that they would motivate the base a little bit more to do better. And, that kind of brings me to the final question I want to ask you. And then, of course, we can expand on any issues that you think I haven't touched on yet, which is, I'm sure, many issues that I haven't touched on. But I really think that one of the smartest things that the GOP could possibly do is put Scott Presler on the payroll and tell him your job is to train 100 people just like you. And I think that that's kind of like the bare minimum buy-in. And I feel like that's a completely achievable goal. But Scott Presler, I mean, he already does the training. He already knows how to do it. And why is Scott Presler like the only Scott Presler that exists? There should be hundreds of Scott Preslers all over the country. Do you think that'd be a good idea for them?
There's only ever going to be one Scott Presler, but there could be many Scotts in a manner of speaking. I agree that they really should put him in as high a position as possible. I think he'd be a good chair of the RNC.
I do too.
That would be brilliant. I would hope that Trump would seriously consider that if he's reelected. And there's no reason not to have Pressler's game plan be replicated in as many places as possible. Although, of course, there is only one Pressler. The guy is something close to a magician of the election sphere. And it's really interesting to see how I suppose he is able to communicate with and engage, especially a lot of younger Republicans who are online, which is very important for the party going forward. People tweeting about this issue or that issue, or if you're talking about like the trad types talking about how they wished, abortion were totally illegal, and I presume gay marriage was totally illegal as well. That really engages with a small base, but it doesn't engage with enough people you need to win elections. But someone like Presler, I think, really, he at once takes the conflict, the electoral conflict, to the Democrats, and he finds ways of spreading ideas of the GOP to people who probably would not hear them otherwise. So I think he's really done an outstanding job, and he deserves to be RNC chairman.
No, I completely agree with you. My audience will tell you, I still complain to this day that Scott Presler was not invited to speak at the 2020 GOP convention.
That was terrible.
I was like, it was really bad. It was such a snub.
That was terrible. Yeah, it was actually a very nice convention, but he should have been brought there. It's a shame that he wasn't.
Yeah, well, he did get a nice award at CPAC, so I guess that was really special for him too. I mean, he's just like the nicest guy in the world and is so earnest in what he's doing. And I really wish the GOP would take him more seriously. And I hope that Trump does make him chair of the GOP. I think that would be, or the RNC. I think that would be amazing.
I agree wholeheartedly.
All right. Well, I just want to kind of turn it over to you, Joseph. I've been asking all the questions. What issues are important that I haven't thought of?
We've gone over so many important issues here. I think that really the big three are what I mentioned. It's the CRT stuff, and that relates to education. It's the economy, particularly inflation and the border, getting that secured and stopping the massive flow of migrants. Although I think for the GOP in the long run, it's important to de-emphasize the importance of conservative philosophy, conservative movement ideas, blah, 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 because that stuff just doesn't sell much nowadays outside of a certain base. That's a big reason why Trump was elected, because there was a revolt among the GOP ranks against the movement conservatism. The GOP should really position itself not so much as a party of the right, although it needs to have certainly many people on the right in its ranks, but it needs to position itself as a party of the non-left to counter whatever the Democrats have in store. So that means you have anyone from a religious social conservative to someone who is, I don't know, who might have Bernie Sanders-esque economic views in the same coalition. And you also have people who are, anti-abortion, pro-choice. You have people who are, well, I was going to say, you have both men and women represented well within it. I don't, I only think there's two genders, so I really can't talk about the panoply of genders. But it really needs to become a coalition, the GOP, not so much a traditional party, because when one looks at it in America, there just is not an audience for traditional movement conservatism anymore. And there is, though, an audience for opposition to what the Democrats are proposing or what they're actually doing. So the GOP has to go with that. Some people might say, well, Joseph, it just means that the Republican Party is moving leftward. Not necessarily. Certain wings of it will move left, certain wings of it will move right, certain wings of it will try to stay in place as much as that's possible. Arguably, it's not. But all the same, the GOP would just be a coalition with many different moving parts doing different things. That being said, as the country moves leftward on social and cultural issues, obviously the GOP cannot try to, stay like a stick in the mud circa 1981. So the idea that it should never change is ridiculous. But the idea that it should just agree to every bit of nonsense the Democrats propose in the name of quote unquote social progress is nonsense as well. The GOP really should not adopt any one size fits all solution here. It should be a broad based coalition with many different people who unite behind a statement of principles, such as what Trump had in 2020. And those principles should be tantamount to opposition to what the Democratic Party is proposing.
Well, I'm so appreciative of this conversation because I feel like I'm surrounded by so many conservatives all the time, and obviously like more religious ones than not religious ones, that it's actually incredibly refreshing just to talk with a Republican that's like a common sense, like the Big Tent Republicans still exist. So I want to just really thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome. And there are more Republicans out there who are not at all in keeping with this religious bizarro world stuff than I think some would think. It's just that on social media, the more extreme views are amplified, and these people with these bizarre religious perspectives, bizarre religio-political perspectives, I should say, they have an outsized influence because they all sort of gather together in a hive mind and they amplify their voice, even though if they had their ideal candidate, he probably wouldn't even win a Republican primary, let alone, a general election. And these folks know that they're losing, and that's why they're getting so angry, because it's reaction to their failure.
Mm-hmm. Well, John Morgan in the chat says, "I like this guy. Can we have him on more? Would you be open to coming back sometime?"
I would be very glad to do so. I actually I have another book coming out in July, so perhaps we could discuss that.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And I just want to remind everyone that Joseph does have a book out already, in addition to the one coming out in July. Runaway Masters, a true story of slavery, freedom, triumph, and the tragedy beyond 1619 and 7076. And I also want you guys to subscribe to his podcast if you like. I just popped that link in the chat so you can make sure you keep up on his analysis, because like just common sense, just like no non-emotional, no nonsense. I really like it. And I think, again, I find a lot of agreement with you, even though we might disagree on some issues. But I think just, I think that the GOP and the Republicans need to embrace that big tent. It's what's going to be better for all of us at the end of the day. And even though, I might try to get a libertarian spoiler in 2024 just because that's fun for me, ultimately I do actually want to see the GOP win, because I'm realistic in that I know the libertarians will not.
Yeah, they really won't. That's not to say that the libertarians should, pack up and go away, but it is to say that they're not going to win, and whatever candidate they have maybe will prod the GOP in a positive direction, so they don't, so the Republicans don't try to lose votes to that libertarian. We'll see, but that has happened in the past, and maybe it'll happen again. I think, though, that if Trump is the nominee in 24, he would have a pretty broad-based appeal to different people who just dislike what the Democrats are doing, and that's a big reason why I want to see him get the nomination. Now, say someone like a Josh Hawley, that would be a different story. That would be that would it wouldn't go well. He would certainly lose, but it would also divide the GOP badly and make it more ideological rather than the big tent that it has to be.
Well, I want to just, I don't know, do you pay attention to libertarian politics at all? Just as an aside before we wrap up.
I don't follow it terribly closely, but I am aware of it.
So you might want, like, I actually think, and again, I might be a little bit biased, I actually think that what's going on in the Libertarian Party right now is one of the most fascinating, untold political stories, because in about a week and a half, the Libertarian Party is going to come under completely new management because it's being taken over by a specific caucus within the party, and they're going to completely rout in Reno. And this is the caucus that it's actually the only movement that I can think of that they have defeated wokeism within the party, and they are turning it back because
Really?
the Mises Caucus, one of the
Oh,
platforms
that's outstanding. I do know
oh
who they
yeah.
are.
Yeah, and they're going to be running things in a couple of weeks, and so that's why I joined the Libertarian Party, was because of the Mises Caucus and the no identity politics, no nonsense, no woke stuff, and so I'm really excited.
What that could be is a template for the Republicans, obviously.
Mhm.
And if the Libertarians said it, the GOP, if it works well enough for the Libertarians, not necessarily winning elections, but having a functional party, the Republicans could absorb it. The GOP is, I mean, obviously headed in that direction already, but it's going to have to continue to do so because it wants to have this coalition that it needs to win. It's going to have different people in the ranks. And instead of focusing on identity to keep everyone, in line, focusing on anti-identity politics is the way forward. It's how you keep a coalition together consisting of many different types of people.
Awesome. Do you have any places you want people to connect with you online, or anything else you want us to know about before we conclude?
Well, I am on Twitter. If you'll just type in Joseph Ford Cotto on Google and then they type in Twitter as well, I should come right up. Cotto Gottfried, the show I co host with my good friend Paul Gottfried, it is it live streams on YouTube. We don't keep the episodes up on YouTube because YouTube is YouTube, but they are released as podcasts. But if people want to catch the live streams, which I highly recommend that they do, then they should subscribe to Cotto Gottfried on YouTube. All you have to do is go on YouTube, type in Cotto Gottfried, and the show will come right up. It's a blue profile picture with the words Cotto Gottfried in it, and you'll be able to catch the live stream. You'll be notified of the live streams if you turn on the notifications. So that's that. I wish we could, we used to keep the whole show up on YouTube, but censorship has become so crazy that it just wasn't worth it after a while, living in fear. We didn't even get taken down from YouTube or anything like that. It was just that, walking on pins and needles simply was not worth the stress of it. But thankfully, even on big platforms like Apple and Google and Spotify, they're more lenient than YouTube is, and so Cotto Gottfried has found a good home. It's on the podcast uploads on many different platforms, but people should subscribe to it. I think on Apple, that's where it gets most of its listenership. Maybe Spotify if they want, but I really am glad to have had this discussion. It's been a pleasure, and as long as you're up for it, I look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. I'll look forward to that, and we'll be in touch about that. Guys, I just want to thank Joseph again for coming on the channel and providing us with really excellent analysis of the current political situation. And if you are looking for the link to his Twitter or anything else, it should be in the description right below the stream. And I'm gonna pull you off the screen for a second here, Joseph, while I do my shilling, but I will be right back with you in a sec. And guys, just as a reminder, if you would like to connect with me on a more one-on-one basis, you're going to be able to do that in about 40 minutes, because we are going live with my community Zoom that is supporter exclusive over at kb.locals.com/support. So if you want to get in on the action, join my amazing locals community and support the work I'm doing, that's where you can find me. You can also support my efforts by making sure you purchase my book, Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. It is currently out in hardcover and Kindle version. For those who are looking for the audiobook, don't worry, it's coming back. There's quality control issues. We're resolving it. I'm re-recording it. It's going to be great. But that is going to be coming soon as well. And if you are looking forward to joining the book club for Actively Unwoke, keep an eye on your email because I will be sending out a notification to everyone who signed up for book club because we're going to be moving the dates just because some people haven't even gotten their books yet. And that's just something I can't control, but we can control the dates of book club. And so we're going to be doing that. Also, a quick programming note before I conclude for today, just so you guys know, tomorrow we've got a couple streams on the channel. Of course, tomorrow we have Nothing Remotely Controversial at 9:30 with Joshua. And fun fact, tomorrow is our 100th episode. So we've done 100 episodes of news and psychicking and general fun and shenanigans, and we're going to celebrate that tomorrow at 9:30. But live at 5 tomorrow, I want to give you guys a heads up. Live at 5 is actually going to become live at 4 tomorrow. And the reason that I'm going to be going live an hour early at 4 p.m. tomorrow is because I'm going to be recording a roundtable for the Liberty Lockdown podcast with Jeremy Kauffman and I think Timmy Baxter. I'm running for governor in New Hampshire as a Libertarian. Jeremy's running for Senate. Timmy Baxter is running for Congress in New Hampshire as a Republican, but that's okay. We won't hold that against him because he's an excellent Republican candidate. And so we're going to be recording a panel for that starting at 6 p.m. So to accommodate that, I'm going to be moving my live back to 4 p.m., just starting a little bit early, and I'll be posting a notification about that. But guys, please make sure you mount the like button on the way out the door. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not already. I do content every single day of the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I'm live on this channel. On Fridays, I go live on my second channel, Actively Unwoke. And on Saturdays, we are doing Sassy Saturday this week. And of course, I try to do clips in between just to make things a little bit shorter because I know you guys like that. All right, I will see my locals in about 40 minutes, 35 minutes now. Take care, guys, and we'll see you soon.